January 28, 1846, becomes more than a date when it is framed as a calculation that should not. Resolve 2,800 against more than 30,000. The arithmetic alone promises an ending, yet the interest lies in how the sum is broken. The British formation is thin, professional, and led by a commander who refuses to let numbers dictate narrative. The opposing army is disciplined, confident, and accustomed to fighting on prepared terms. Between these two forces sits a question that pulls the listener forward. By what logic does the smaller side claim the field? The answer is not mystique nor reckless courage. It is a chain of learned principles made practical. Smith did not inherit a miracle. He built one through habit. Move faster than decisions can catch you. Combine arms so that each blow opens the next, and teach subordinates intent so that execution never stalls waiting for permission. His understanding of tempo is not theater. It is a weapon. His formations are not tricks. They are tools that convert disciplined practice into battlefield flexibility. His restraint after success is not softness. It is protection against the counterblow that often punishes the triumphant. The hook is therefore simple and precise. Do not watch to see whether the underdog survives. Watch to see how excellence, repeated and drilled, rearranges what is supposedly inevitable. The battle becomes a demonstration. The leader becomes a lens. The army becomes a system that moves at a pace the enemy cannot match. By the time the larger force fully recognizes the design, a flank is gone, a center is compromised, and pursuit would only feed the prepared squares meant to stop it. This story offers both spectacle and method. The spectacle is a line that does not fold. The method is a doctrine that does not pause. By the end of the day, the odds on paper will be irrelevant, yet the reasons will be useful far beyond one field. That is the promise at the start, a forgotten tactical mind showing how speed, coordination, and disciplined initiative turn a crisis into a lesson. Stay with the story not only to learn what happened, but to acquire a way of thinking that applies whenever scale appears to be destiny. The system that eventually breaks a line at Aliwal begins at a breach in Spain. Badajoz in 1812 is not remembered for finesse. It is remembered for slaughter, for the terrible cost of forcing a fortress that refuses easy entry, and for the decisions made when order falters. Among the officers inside that night is a young professional who absorbs two opposite lessons at once. Brutality wastes lives without guarantee. Yet momentum, once seized, must be fed until resistance disintegrates. The distinction matters. Momentum is not frenzy. It is speed with discipline. Smith observes that once troops reach foothold, hesitation is a luxury that converts success into renewed defense. The breaches, once penetrated, cannot be grips for consolidation alone. They must be openings for pressure that denies the enemy time to sort ranks and recover direction. The pattern becomes clear. Secure contact, apply immediate organized violence, reset only when the opponent's decision-making collapses. Later, when he names this as volley-and-advance, he is putting a repeatable label on something learned when the difference between moving and stopping was a wall of musketry. Badajoz also adds a human dimension that reshapes the way he will command. The encounter with Wana in the aftermath teaches that the business of war does not remove the obligation to act with restraint where restraint is possible. That lesson does not dull aggression. It makes every order carry weight. When lives are valued, planning becomes sharper, and training becomes a duty owed to the rank and file. Efficiency is no longer merely a tactical virtue. It is a moral one that reduces needless loss. From this furnace emerge three habits. First, compress time between initial success and exploitation. Second, train units to act in sequence without elaborate prompting, because noise and smoke will erase the possibility of long explanation. Third, recognize that soldiers fight better for leaders who take responsibility after the firing stops. These habits are not slogans. They are practices he will drill into every formation he later commands. Thus, the early chapter is not ornament. It is origin. The officer who sees the killing grounds at the breaches understands that superiority is not granted. It is manufactured by tempo and structure. He will apply that understanding anywhere terrain, distance, or complacency tempts an army to slow. The product of Badajoz is not a hero's aura, but a checklist. Strike quickly when foothold appears, support the strike with prepared follow-on action, and shape culture so that discipline keeps momentum safe from disorder. That triad will resurface decades later under new names, but the core remains the same. Do not let the enemy breathe once you have a hand on the wall. Before any square can flex or any column can advance while reloading, a certain mindset must be standard. The 95th Rifles provided. This is a unit trained to move independently, to read ground as instruction, and to treat initiative as the default rather than the exception. Smith learns that small decisions made correctly at the edges save many lives at the center. He also learns that skirmishers who understand purpose do more than sting the enemy. They shape the enemy's path toward prepared destruction. Wellington's influence is equally practical. The commander's method emphasizes ground selection and forcing the opponent to fight a battle that benefits the defender's geometry. Smith absorbs that discipline without inheriting its conservatism. The synthesis becomes crucial. Select the ground that simplifies your logistics and complicates the enemy's. Then, if opportunity appears, transform patience into acceleration. Terrain is more than backdrop. It is a multiplier when married to tempo. This apprenticeship establishes several standards. Reconnaissance is not an episode. It is continuous. Orders must explain intent so that companies can act when visibility or distance interrupts command. Reserves are not insurance. They are the decisive blow waiting for the moment when enemy attention is fixed elsewhere. Signals are not ceremony. They are language capable of issuing complex instructions when words cannot carry. These elements are no less important than musketry. A unit that moves quickly without common understanding will exhaust itself in misalignment. A unit that understands intent but cannot communicate in noise will drift apart. The 95th supplies the mental furniture. Every man knows his job and the purpose behind it. From this base, Smith will later design formations that expect units to transform under fire without pause. The key transition is philosophical. Doctrine is not an anchor. It is a starting position. The officer who begins in a rifle regiment sees how loosening formation improves fire distribution and how using cover alters survival. He also sees how rigid columns are vulnerable before they arrive, provided that accurate fire removes the leaders who hold them together. That insight will guide him at Waterloo, but it already lives here. There is always a way to make mass weaker by taking away its ability to think as one. Wellington's careful style and the rifle's independence appear contradictory. In Smith, they become complementary. Choose the ground that converts enemy strength into disadvantage, then trust trained subordinates to keep pressure where pressure counts. The result is doctrine that reads as calm at the map table and as acceleration on the field. That combination, deliberate setup and rapid execution, will later define the difference between a defensive stand and an offensive decision carried through to victory. At Waterloo, the British line survives not by miracle but by angle and discipline. The French columns are built to push. They carry morale in depth and are designed to break a thin line by shock. Yet the advance fails repeatedly for a reason that becomes one of Smith's permanent references. Columns are organisms sustained by a few key nodes. Remove the officers who maintain direction, thin the edges with accurate fire, and the mass loses coherence before contact. This is not romance about marksmanship. It is a practical understanding of timing. Skirmishers forward of the main line prevent a column from arriving as a whole. Fire is directed at leadership and alignment, not at the faceless mass. By the time the column reaches effective volley range of the main formation, it is already compromised. The lesson is precise. The best time to win a close fight is before it becomes one. Smith stores this principle and later recasts it as a general rule: fight the enemy's organization, not just his soldiers. If communications, control, and cohesion are damaged, while distance still protects your line, the final exchange becomes a formality. This observation leads him to magnify the role of light troops, to teach them to target the threads that hold formations together, and to ensure that the main body does not waste ammunition into smoke when better targets exist ahead of the collision. Another thread from that field is the value of steadiness under repeated heavy assaults. Troops that can reclose ranks after losses and re-establish order while firing on command are not simply brave. They are prepared. Preparation is teachable. It is the sum of drills that build automatic alignment and of leadership that keeps panic from multiplying. Smith internalizes the necessity to drill transitions so thoroughly that a unit can reload while moving, halt to volley, and close a gap without asking. Waterloo also reinforces that no single arm decides a modern battle. Artillery shaping attacks, infantry holding and counter-pushing, cavalry exploiting the broken. All of these must appear on the same timeline, not one after another with pauses for the enemy to reset. That concurrency, only hinted at in 1815, will later become explicit in his method. He returns to this memory whenever others tell him to wait for a more balanced field. If fire and movement can peel a formation before contact, then speed is not bravado. It is mercy. The merger of these lessons produces a frame that will fit any battlefield. Control the approach, erode the opposing organization, and make the decisive moment arrive on your schedule. In that frame, even a larger force discovers that numbers cannot replace the few elements that keep a formation thinking. The campaign lessons gathered in Europe are tested against distance in southern Africa. There, the obstacle is not only opposition but terrain. An army that moves like a parade cannot catch a foe that chooses the time and place of contact. Smith's response is to strip movement down to what actually produces combat power. Baggage trains are cut to essentials. March discipline rises. Units learn to cover ground at a pace that surprises both ally and opponent. This is not speed for speed's sake. It is speed to create options. When a commander can concentrate two dispersed elements faster than the adversary expects, he can bait a strike and meet it with superior local strength. This is rapid concentration, and it depends on two supports, signaling that travels reliably across miles and subordinates who can begin moving toward intent before detailed orders arrive. Bugles and flags are not props. They are a network. Officers are not mere couriers. They are decision-makers entrusted with direction inside a shared plan. Living light requires cultural change. Soldiers accustomed to comfort resist until they see the results. Contact made on their terms, engagements concluded before the enemy can accumulate. The burden of adaptation falls on training. Marches are timed. Loads are weighed. The unit becomes a machine that knows its own capacity. That self-knowledge prevents waste and allows accurate promises about arrival. Timelines stop being guesses and become tools. In this laboratory, Smith confirms that logistics must serve maneuver rather than dictate it. He also sees that moving fast does not excuse disorganization. The faster formation must be the tighter one, because error compounds with pace. Therefore, rehearsals include abrupt changes of direction, immediate deployment from column to line, and reformations executed at signals heard once. This is where the seeds of later flexible formations are watered. A unit must be able to defend or attack on short notice without losing alignment. The product is a force that can appear where it is not expected, that can pressure an adversary to defend too wide a front, and that can withdraw from overcommitment without disintegrating. By the time Smith reaches India, he carries a doctrine of movement that treats time as a decisive resource. Against a peer who has artillery, numbers, and trained infantry, that resource will be the lever that shifts the field. Speed, to him, is not bravado. It is the quiet arithmetic that converts dispersed companies into a sudden hammer at the point of choice. The Sikh Khalsa is not a familiar colonial opponent. It is a trained, disciplined, and well-armed force with European-influenced drill, abundant artillery, and cavalry that can punish exposed flanks. Against such a formation, stale methods invite loss. Early battles in the war show as much. Frontal action trades volleys against an opponent prepared to absorb them, and casualties accumulate without decision. A commander who relies on weight alone will bleed for ground and find little advantage. Smith's diagnosis is clinical. If the opponent's strength is informed defense supported by guns, then pushing frontally is an act of charity to the defender. The problem is not courage. The problem is timing. Show the adversary a single axis, and he will move reserves correctly, settle the guns, and let discipline do the rest. Therefore, the remedy is not a larger hammer, but a faster set of hands. Present two problems on different clocks, and do so before the opposition can orient. This is where his concept of mission, intent communicated clearly down the chain, changes from philosophy to necessity. In a fight where visibility is poor and distances are long, waiting for detailed direction is another way of conceding time. Smith resolves to brief thoroughly before contact and to issue simple, unambiguous signals during it. Subordinates are expected to pursue the shared aim. Keep the enemy from stabilizing, maintain forward pressure where success appears, and refuse pursuit that leads into prepared traps. Respect for the adversary shapes the plan. The Sikh army is not an enemy that will evaporate under a single blow. It will hold. It will redeploy. It will counterattack with weight when an opportunity appears. That expectation produces a reserve in Smith's hand, not as an afterthought, but as a designed pivot for the moment when the enemy narrows his focus to one threat. In earlier wars, reserves often guarded against fear. Here, the reserve is the instrument that turns disruption into collapse. The theater demands more than belief. It demands a framework that sustains rapid movement without losing control. Smith's answer merges his African laboratory with his European apprenticeship. Lean logistics, rehearsed transformations, and communications dense enough to support simultaneous actions. The army must be ready to demonstrate on one flank, break on the other, and then shift strength again before the opponent calms the field. Thus, the meeting at Aliwal is not an accident. It is the arrival of an approach suited to appear. Instead of proving that bravery can exceed numbers, Smith intends to prove that tempo can invalidate them. The plan will not ask the enemy to fail. It will require the enemy to be excellent at two things at once on a clock that does not allow both to be done. The tools for executing a plan against a peer must be reliable under strain. Two such tools define Smith's force. The first is a flexible rectangle commonly called the Smith square. It is not the static refuge used against cavalry. It is a formation that can defend in all directions while projecting attack from selected faces. Then close those openings again without losing integrity. The value is not novelty. The value is the ability to toggle between safety and pressure without resetting the unit. Achieving this utility requires training that touches every rank. Each soldier knows his place when the formation is closed, his place when a face opens to extend a firing line, and his motion when the unit must reconstitute to meet mounted threat. Officers drill these transitions until they are reflexive. As a result, the formation can move under fire with fewer surprises. The square advances as a moving fortress, but one that can suddenly send a hand forward to strike and then withdraw the hand before it is bitten. The second tool is volley-and-advance. Traditional doctrine favors firing from a halt, reloading under cover of formation, and resuming the exchange until one side has had enough. Smith replaces that rhythm with a cadence that keeps distance shrinking while fire continues. A volley lands. The ranks step forward while reloading without losing alignment. Another volley lands from a closer range. The effect is psychological and physical. The defender cannot reset aim or heart between blows because the field keeps altering. This is not magic. Reloading while moving is error-prone and dangerous if done by men who are unsure of footwork or drill. Therefore, the technique is rehearsed at measured paces, on varying ground, and under conditions that simulate the blindness of battle. The unit becomes capable of maintaining a straight line with weapons ready while closing. Fire discipline is non-negotiable. No man fires alone. Volleys are ordered to maximize shock and to conserve ammunition for the decisive moment. Mission command is the glue, a formation that can flex, and a cadence that keeps pressure will still fail if leaders freeze awaiting permission. Smith does not require guesswork. He provides intent. Deny the defender time, exploit any sag in the line, and avoid chasing disorder into a trap. Within that boundary, captains and majors apply judgment. The battlefield is not the place to invent doctrine. It is the place to apply rehearsed doctrine to the specifics of an unfolding shape. With these tools, the army can arrive in contact strong, change posture without confusion, and continue forward in a way that multiplies the first success into the second. When the time comes to commit the reserve, it will meet a center already softened by a rhythm the defender never matched. The scheme is built on two simultaneous truths presented to the enemy on different clocks. On the Sikh right, the British will demonstrate with conviction. Guns will speak and infantry will advance as if preparing to take the works. This is not a feeble show. It must be credible enough to pull attention in reserves. On the Sikh left, hidden until required, the breaking force will move at double time in a flexible formation meant to slip through an identified gap, then wheel along the line to unravel it. The clock is the weapon. Recognition, order drafting, relay, and movement take time in any army. Smith intends to force the opponent to spend that time more than once before the first expenditure pays off. While the right draws notice, the left appears already near decision. When the left is being contained at last, the right stops pretending and applies real pressure where the weakened defense can no longer carry the previous weight. At each step, bugles and flags coordinate not a script, but a set of conditional moves. A reserve is held back for the moment when the enemy chooses. The choice will be visible: thinning of the center to buttress the flank, or artillery shifting in a way that opens a seam. The reserve's task is not decoration. It is to convert loss of balance into fall. It will move in protective configuration until close, then transform to line for the blunt task of shocking a sector that has already lost coherence. This design demands that subordinates understand it. They are briefed in full. They know not only their axis, but the reason for it. When reports arrive that contradict expectation, they are empowered to change local method while preserving the aim. A feint on the right that finds unexpected weakness is authorized to turn pressure into entry, provided that the left can sustain its tempo. The plan is thus not brittle. It is bounded discretion, tethered to a shared picture. If the enemy refuses the bait and remains stubbornly distributed, the British do not run headlong. The objective remains the same: concentrate faster than the foe can respond and maintain momentum through transformation. The scheme is patient about opportunity and impatient about exploitation. Those two attitudes coexist by design. When the morning becomes noise and dust, the structure will hold because it is built on simple rules. Draw attention, hit elsewhere, watch for the moment when attention wobbles, and then strike where the wobble becomes a fall. When the double quick force reveals itself on the left, it arrives in order rather than haste. The leading battalion converts formation with practiced economy and delivers its first timed volley at a range selected to shock rather than merely announce. The target is not the whole of the defense. It is the section least ready to receive. Before the response stabilizes, the British line steps forward while reloading. Another volley lands closer and heavier. The cadence matters more than volume. Behind that line, following units keep the rhythm, never bunching, never blocking fields of fire. The effect is a walking wall of lead that keeps reducing the time the defender has to breathe. The opponent's guns begin to wheel, but the geometry they seek is already obsolete when they arrive at each new position. The discipline of movement, the one drilled in quiet hours, pays for itself here when alignment does not bend under the stress of closing distance. Cavalry does not surge as a grand gesture. It appears in packets, committed where an infantry volley has just forced a local withdrawal or exposed a flank mid-movement. The mounted men disrupt, then peel away before counterweights can arrive. Their task is not to decide the battle alone. Their task is to accelerate collapse by turning temporary disorder into a route within that slice of the line. The packets move repeatedly rather than spectacularly. On the demonstration flank, the guns continue the story the enemy believes until the moment comes to switch from narrative to calculation. With reserves drawn off to manage the crisis elsewhere, the defenders here are thinner. The British infantry shift from rehearsal to execution, pressing forward with the same measured advance that has already proven decisive on the left. Now the enemy faces two races and cannot win either: restore a flank while preventing a breach on the other side, or save the center while leaving one wing to unravel. The rupture is not a single dramatic crack. It is the accumulation of small defeats imposed faster than leaders can mend them. When companies that should have formed square are caught in transition, When a battalion meant to redeploy is hit before files dress. When artillery turns toward one crisis and exposes another, cohesion becomes a memory. The breakthrough is recognized not by cheering, but by the appearance of gaps that no one is filling. At that moment, Smith's reserve awaits its signal, prepared to convert an enemy's adjustment into the final loss of structure. The reserve moves under protection, absorbing fire without pause and repairing ranks as men fall. It advances with a pace designed to preserve strength for the moment of transformation. When range and angle are right, the formation opens into line with the practiced economy of a drill square. Volleys arrive in disciplined sequence, 3 shocks measured by breath and command. The center that has already donated strength to rescue a flank now meets a concentrated blow and cannot pay the bill. The temptation here is reckless exploitation. Smith declines it. Instead of chasing every retreating clump, he orders a brief reformation. Ammunition is checked. Lines are dressed. The army becomes crisp again before the next phase. This pause is not softness. It is insurance against the classic riposte, a countercharge by cavalry, seeking to punish scattered infantry. When that charge comes, what it meets are squares formed in seconds, according to a signal agreed upon long before. The cavalry is brave and numerous, yet bravery cannot penetrate geometry supported by fire discipline. Saddles empty at the square's angles. Horsemen circle looking for the seam that does not exist. The British do not break ranks to celebrate each recoil. They hold their shape until the enemy's will to continue fades. The moment the threat recedes, the squares do not remain statues. They reform to resume forward motion. Elsewhere on the field, the initial demonstration strengthens into reality. Units that had been pressing for effect now press for breach, finding less resistance than earlier. The enemy's leaders must choose which wound to stanch. In choosing, they expose another. The reserve's success at the center removes any remaining possibility of a controlled withdrawal. What might have been a fighting retreat becomes a scramble to avoid encirclement. The mark of a disciplined army is not only how it attacks, but how it declines bad offers. Smith's refusal to pursue disorganized enemies into potential traps preserves strength for the finishing movement. His men have been taught that a victory is complete when the opposing organization is gone, not when the last fugitives are chased across a field. That outlook keeps them from discovering a late disaster in a cloud of triumph. The result is that when the order comes to sweep, the force that sweeps is whole. The finishing movement is coordinated breadth, not an unruly chase. Units align across a wide front and move steadily, capturing guns, securing the baggage, and compelling surrender from groups that attempt to rally. Cavalry returns to its role. Intervene when a pocket tries to escape, and retire before being drawn too far. The decision is no longer in doubt. The work is to convert broken resistance into controlled conclusion. Casualties on the winning side remain comparatively low because the fight ends quickly once organization collapses. That economy owes as much to discipline as to courage. Fire is directed where it prevents new centers from forming. The line does not dissolve for trophies or stories. It holds shape until the field truly belongs to the force that owns it. The artillery is silenced, the wagons are taken, and what remains of the opposition drifts away in fragments rather than regiments. Conduct after victory matters. Wounded enemies receive the same medical attention as friends. Religious customs are respected when the dead are gathered. Prisoners are treated as professionals who fought bravely. This is not a flourish. It is a deliberate policy that reduces future resistance and signals that defeat in arms does not mean humiliation in treatment. Soldiers who observe this standard understand that their own lives are valued beyond the moment of usefulness. Morale rises when men see that success does not corrupt their leaders. The presence of a trusted figure near the fighting strengthens resolve before and steadies behavior after. Confidence spreads when reassurance comes from a voice known to care about outcomes beyond statistics. In such an environment, small acts of judgment by junior leaders align with the commander's vision. A private who regains nerve and a captain who takes initiative both express a culture that values skill and respect. By nightfall, the field tells the story in stark terms. Guns collected, baggage secured, units accounted for, and an enemy no longer organized as an army. The battle demonstrates that disadvantage in numbers can be offset by tempo, combined arms, and disciplined initiative. The message travels beyond the day's map. It becomes curriculum. Teach the cadence that closes while firing. Drill the transformations that protect while advancing. And cultivate a command climate that can move on intent rather than constant permission. The sweep ends the fighting. The mercy protects the meaning of the victory. What remains after the smoke is a set of principles verified by practice. First, tempo decides. Acting inside the opponent's decision cycle is not a metaphor. It is the exploitation of human limits. When you present two problems faster than a system can solve one, it falters. Second, combined arms belongs on one timeline. Artillery suppresses what infantry must cross. Infantry creates openings cavalry can exploit. Each arm anticipates the other rather than waiting to be asked. Third, mission command scales clarity. Intent traveling down the chain permits useful initiative when noise erases details. Leaders at every level make better decisions because they understand why, not just what. Fourth, formations must be flexible. Being able to defend while attacking, or attack immediately after defending, deprives the enemy of predictable windows. Fifth, aggression must be calculated. Speed without discipline becomes waste. Discipline without speed becomes attrition. The art lies in pairing them. These rules are not confined to one century or profession. They reappear when armored forces conduct wide flanking maneuvers that crack static defenses by arriving where mass cannot follow. They appear when light units strike, exploit captured information, and strike again before opposition networks can reset. They appear when organizations outside the military outpace rivals by making decisions faster and distributing authority to the edge within a common framework. For teams in any field, the translation is straightforward. Build capacity for rapid, coordinated action by rehearsing transitions before crisis. Teach purpose with enough depth that people can act when plans change. Remove unnecessary weight from processes so that movement is easy when opportunity appears. Keep a reserve, time, people, or resources ready to commit when the opponent overreacts to your first move. Respect those who compete with you and enforce standards that align success with values you intend to keep after the win. Finally, remember that excellence is the compound interest of preparation. The units at Aliwal did not invent their performance on the day. They trained it until it was simply their way of working. When the chance came to decide a larger contest, they recognized it. The smaller force won, not because chance favored it, but because it moved, thought, and coordinated faster without losing control. This is why the story holds beyond the context of one campaign. It shows that craft matters, that leadership shaping culture is strategic, and that disciplined speed is kinder to those who must carry risk. Whether the arena is competitive business, sport, or public service, the pattern is the same. Choose the ground well, communicate intent, move with purpose, and keep a reserve for the moment that decides more than effort alone can. The legacy is not fame, it is a method. Apply it, and odds that once looked permanent become variables subject to your preparation and will.